Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. Hey, everybody. All right. What kind of Oh, wait. I'm not even going to ask. Aren't we still on the series?
Yeah, we are, and I'm jam-packed the rest of the guys in here. So there was a total of 6. We've already done Todd, and we did Tommy, and now I'm wrapping in the rest of the 4 guys just so we can wrap it up. But
all right.
Yeah, you're going to see also very similar to Todd Geib and Tommy Booth.
All right. So the rest of the smiley face murders.
Yep, we're going to wrap it up. This is the final episode.
All right.
Okay.
Tell me about it.
All right, so we are going to get into it. This is season 7, episode 15, and the final episode of the Smiley Face Killers. And in this episode, we will be talking about Brian Welzian, Will Hurley, Luke Homan, and Dakota James. Brian Welzian was 21 years old. He attended Northern Illinois University. He was an honor roll student at the university. And on December 31st, 1999, Brian and his friends booked a hotel room downtown Chicago to celebrate the new year. Now, it sounds like Brian was not really the type to party it up. I mean, in fact, it sounds like he rarely ever drank. This was kind of a last-minute thing that Brian even went. You see, Brian was a college student, as I mentioned, and he did very well in school. And he was very much into his health, and he was an avid soccer player. Now, I want to say that he even played soccer at the university. I'm pretty sure that's what I remember seeing about this guy. So he was a very fit, athletic, young man. Now, when Brian's mom was interviewed by Gannon, so if you remember, it's Gannon and his team that are investigating all these possible connected cases to the Smiley Face Killers. His mother even said that her son was not a big drinker. Going out again was a last-minute decision. He basically received a call the last minute inviting him to go to Chicago with his 4 friends. Now, this was out of character for him, but he did decide to go. Not sure how much pressure his friends may or may not have put on him to do it, but either way, he decided that he would go along. And sadly, December 31st, 1999, would be the last time his mother would see him alive. The men had a hotel secured so they could crash there after a long night out in the Windy City. Now, geographically, Chicago, Illinois is directly west of the Mitten. It's basically a straight shot across Lake Michigan. Now, after the young men unloaded all of their things at the hotel, they headed out to the Irish Eyes Bar. Now, his friends say that Brian only had 2 drinks that night, at least 1, maybe 2 max, and he was drinking Long Island iced teas over the course of the time that they were at Irish Eyes. But his behavior did not reflect just a couple of drinks. Brian was acting as if he was very intoxicated. He was stumbling around and told his friends that he wanted to leave. Now, as you can imagine, the night was still young, and there was a lot of partying left to do. So not everyone wanted to leave with Brian. So a couple of his friends stayed behind, but a couple of them did leave with Brian. Now, on the way out of the bar, Brian was even falling down. On their way back to the hotel in the car, Brian started throwing up. And when they arrived and they parked in the parking lot at the hotel, Brian got out of the car, but he could not stop puking, and he was violently puking. His friend said that on the way back into the hotel, that Brian was really out of sorts. His legs like jello. Finally, between puking bouts, the men started making their way to the entrance of the hotel, but the doorman would not let Brian in because he was just like continuously throwing up. So he's like, nope, you're not coming in. So it must have been a pretty fancy-dancy hotel, right? You got a doorman at the door. The friends that Brian was with, they went on in. And I think, what the fuck? You've got a friend out here that's sicker and shit, and they all just left him. They're like, okay, dude, you can't come in. We're going upstairs. That's a guy for you, right? I mean, if that was a group of girls, at least somebody would have stayed behind with the friend.
You know, that was shitty friendship right there is what that was. They just left him out there, sick as a dog, barely able to stand, and repeatedly throwing up, and they left him alone?
Yeah, they're like, deuces. We're tired.
Yeah. No bueno. Not good friends.
No, like, even if nothing happened to this guy, that would have been the last time I would have hung out with those people. Like, that's so wrong on so many levels. All right, so later that night, when the rest of the friends came back, one of them was a very long-time friend of Brian's. He was kind of checking the room out, and he noticed that Brian wasn't there. And when he asked where Brian was, he was told about how sick Brian was in the car and in the parking lot, and then he couldn't come in, the whole 9 yards. So this dude was like, okay, I got to go find Brian. So he headed on down, but he wasn't in the parking lot. He was thinking maybe he was passed out somewhere, so he started looking around everywhere, but he still couldn't find Brian. Now, Chicago is a pretty big city, big blocks, so his friend walked west, no Brian, walked east, still no Brian. Now, as you can imagine, the panic his friends were going through. He was reported missing, and then, of course, Brian's mother learned about what had happened that night and that her son was nowhere to be found. Brian was missing for a total of, get this, 77 days. Yeah, 77 days. But when they found him, of course, he was not alive and well. His body was found on the shores of Lake Michigan, lying on his back, head facing the water. But Brian was not on the shore near Chicago, so if you have never been to Chicago, it's basically a hop, skip, and a jump from the city to get to the shores of Lake Michigan. Brian's body was discovered on the lakeshore in Gary, Indiana. Where his body was found is approximately 31 miles south from Chicago. The autopsy report showed Brian had a BAC, which is blood alcohol content, of 0.84. Now, I don't know how much Brian weighed, but by looking at photographs of him, I would place him anywhere between maybe 140, 150, tops 160 pounds. He was a kind of a thin dude, but all muscle. So I looked up a blood alcohol chart for men, and I put the website for this, that has the graphs for this in the show notes if anybody's interested. Now, on the website, you can look up knowing your limit for men or women, and the chart indicates how many drinks according to body weight, along with the type of impairment. So by me estimating Brian 140 to 160, a blood alcohol content of 0.83 puts Brian at about 3 drinks and an intoxication level of legally intoxicated. Now let's keep in mind, his friend said Brian had 2 drinks, but Brian was drinking Long Island iced teas, which contain a lot of alcohol, right? There's tequila, vodka, white rum, gin. Then you've got triple sec, lemon juice, simple syrup, and a dash of Coke. Just one of these babies packs a punch. I know that for certain. All right. Other autopsy findings regarding decomposition is listed as slight to moderate. How can that be? We learned in our previous episodes that a body floating in water for even a week, the body would be bloated, insects, maggots, skin slippage, and discoloration to the point that the skin would turn black. So how is it that Brian could have been floating in Lake Michigan for over a month, but only show slight to moderate decomposition? Come on. Now, the cause of death on the report listed is asphyxia due to drowning, manner of death unknown. Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I don't get it. I don't understand at all how they got that on this one either.
Yeah. The report also noted that there was fixed lividity on Brian's back. Now, we also know that this means that Brian had to have been lying on his back for anywhere between 8 to 12 hours for fixed lividity to occur. Just in last week's case when we talked about Tommy Booth. Very, very, very similar. Gannon was sitting with Sergeant William Fazekas while reviewing the autopsy report and photos of Brian's body lying on the shore of Lake Michigan. Brian was on his back, head facing the lake. Now, Fazekas told Gannon that this was very unusual to find Brian like this. He said that he has pulled many drowning victims out of the water, and all of them are face down. Every single one. He's never seen a drowning victim on their back. Gannon and his team actually found the good friend that was out with Brian that New Year's Eve night, and he had agreed to meet with them in Chicago. Still very shaken and upset, the friend went over the night with the detectives, laying out the entire night, what he had heard when he returned to the hotel, and where he looked for Brian. And to him, none of it made sense. As sick as Brian was, where could he have walked to? Now, in order to get to the shore of Lake Michigan in Chicago, Brian would have had to make his way across 8 lanes of traffic. Now, again, if you have ever been to Chicago, the traffic there is nuts. There is heavy, heavy traffic. So again, Brian would have had to make his way not only across 8 lanes of speeding traffic to get to the water, he would have had to get over fences and then make his way through an underground tunnel, going down the stairs, then up the stairs after he gets out of the tunnel in order to get to the lake. Well, I call bullshit. There's no way that could have been done. Not in the state Brian was in.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. And let alone how many days later and he's still intact.
Right. There should have been almost nothing left of this guy. Over a month, please.
Yeah, a month in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Now, unlike in Todd Geib and Tommy Booth's cases, there is not a confirmed smiley face seen near Brian's body. I mean, he was on the shoreline in Indiana. And I'm left to wonder if Brian was not taken off the streets of Chicago and then taken to Indiana. He met his end there and then was left on the beach to be discovered. Perhaps a smiley face could have been drawn in the sand, and then with wind and waves it disappeared, but that's just me thinking out loud and really out of the box. Nowhere is it documented that there was a smiley face. To this day, Brian's death certificate and autopsy report remains a drowning with cause of death as unknown. Next, we have Will Hurley. He was 24 years old. He was a Navy veteran. On October 8th, 2009, Brian had attended a Boston Bruins hockey game with some friends. While at the game, he was drinking a beer, and he was seriously irritated and began texting his fiancée, Claire. He wanted her to come and pick him up. Now, he was so irritated with one of the guys who was there with his friend group. Now, this is someone that Will did not know. It's the first time he ever met this guy. Now, and I don't know exactly what this dude was doing or saying that bothered Will as much as he did, but it was to the point where Will had enough and he didn't want to be around this guy anymore. And he had some choice explicative names for this guy that he was texting to his fiancée. I won't repeat them because they're pretty harsh. All right. Now, Will had walked out of the arena, and this was caught on video surveillance. The video showed Will looking down at his phone, and perhaps this was, him texting Claire and telling her where she could find him to pick him up. Now, the other interesting thing seen on the videotape was the way Will seemed to be losing his balance. He was stumbling and at times looked like he was going to fall right over. Now, mind you, Will wasn't at that game long at all, and I'm guessing he had just maybe a beer or two. But when his girlfriend arrived exactly where Will told her he would be, he wasn't there. She drove around again, still no Will, then again and again. Now, Will had also told Claire that his battery was kind of dying, right? So it came to a point where her texts weren't going through, her calls weren't going through, so she just basically was like, oh, damn it, his phone died. So, of course, after searching and searching for her fiancé, Claire finally, of course, called the police and reported what had happened. Police put divers in the Charles River because there's you've got the stadium and then you keep going and then boom, you've got the river there. So they searched and searched for Will, but no Will. So they contacted Claire, Will's fiancé, and told her, quote,
"He's not in the river, so you can put that fear to rest."
He wasn't seen until 6 days later. Can you guess where he was found?
Near the water.
Yep, he was in the Charles River. Now, here's the rub. Where Will's body was found and where police say he fell into the river is not even possible, as his body would have had to go against the current. Now, here's what his autopsy report revealed. Drowning with watery pleural fluid, now that's fluid in the lungs, also watery fluid in his upper GI tract, blunt injuries of the head, contusions on his nose, right periorbital contusion. Now, periorbital is around the eye. Blunt impact injuries of the left lower extremities and abrasions on that leg. Cardiomegaly, which is an enlarged heart, of uncertain etiology, meaning they don't know what caused that. Now, his heart weighed at 500 grams. I'm like, well, what's the average freaking heart? So I looked that up. Now, the average weight of a heart in men is roughly between 280 to 340 grams. Oh, get this. His toxicology report showed that he had GHB, which stands for gamma hydroxybutyric, in his system, and that his blood alcohol level, BAC, or blood alcohol content, was minimal. Now, why in the world they tested for GHB, I can't tell you, because that is not something that is normally tested. So what is GHB, you may be wondering? You may have heard of GHB referred to as the date rape drug. It is odorless, colorless, and tasteless, and it can be easily slipped in a drink, and the one drinking the drink is really none the wiser. Now, GHB can cause euphoria, increased sex drive, and tranquility, but it can also cause swelling, loss of consciousness, nausea, hallucinations, amnesia, and even coma. When a person consumes the GHB, they become incapacitated from the sedative properties of that drug, making the victim unable to resist sexual assault. It has also been reported that it can also have a soapy or salty taste to it. Now, I imagine that could be from this stuff like GHB that you get on the streets. You don't want to buy GHB off the streets because they can cut it with a lot of bad shit, right? So really, really bad things can happen to people. It can kill them, depending on what they cut it with. So here's what police theorize happened with Will. They believe that Will walked out of the arena, walked several blocks until he came to the Charles River. Oopsie, he fell in and drowned. Case closed, right? Well, both Will's mom, Lynn, and sister weren't buying it. They said Will never took drugs and he could hold his liquor. I mean, he wasn't an EV guy. Also to note is that when Will was found, his phone was not with him or on him, but it was recovered by police. They found it in the road outside of the arena, and it was pretty beat. I mean, beat. Now, I believe that police didn't even perform any forensics on his phone, but they did bag and tag it and place it into evidence. Eventually, the phone was turned over to Will's mother, and she in turn handed it over to Gannon and his team. Now, initially to them, it also looked like it had been run over, but when they took it to a forensic digital expert, they told Gannon that, quote,
"When a phone is run over, you don't really see that much damage. The screen may be cracked, that the phone may deform slightly. When somebody wants to destroy a phone, they always take the battery out and discard it, and then they do what we call a twist and separate. If you go to twist it, you're going to get a lot of torque and resistance from the first hinge. The second hinge popped easily.
Now, Gannon believes that the damage on Will's phone was not from being run over, but more likely that someone did this to Will's phone. Now, the phone actually looked like a phone that I used to have. It was like a BlackBerry. It was one of those phones that, when you're looking at it, it looks like a phone, but then you can turn it horizontally and then push forward with your thumbs, and then underneath it, it's like a big keypad for texting. Well, here's the beautiful thing. When the forensic digital expert was looking at the phone and they, got inside the phone, the motherboard was still intact. Now, it was not revealed what data was recovered from that motherboard, though, but they were able to extract data from it. Now, just as the other cases we've talked about, Gannon and his team did extensive scientific testing. They even put a dummy body in the river that was at the same height and weight as Will to test their theory about where Will's body would have actually ended up had he fell into the water where police say he did. And they theorized Will's body would not have ended up where it was. With all of their scientific data in hand, Gannon and Duarte presented to Will's mother. They, as in the other cases, then presented the evidence to the police. But the case has not been reopened. So the team took what they learned and presented it on a local radio station that aired it. And after that interview, the Boston detective contacted Will's mom to ask for his cell phone records. Now, as far as I know, I do not believe that Will's case has been reopened or reclassified, just as in the other men that we've talked about. Next, we have the case of Luke Homan. It was September of 2006. Luke at the time was 21 years old. He was 6'3" and weighed 220 pounds. This is a big athletic boy, let me tell you. He was a star basketball player at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Back in high school, Luke played football and was a quarterback. On September 29, 2006, Luke and his buddies were in downtown La Crosse celebrating Oktoberfest. Luke and his friend or friends were hanging out at the Vibe bar that night. Now, some of these friends they were hanging out with had left the Vibe, but Luke didn't go with them, and he kind of stayed back with another friend of his from the university, who I believe was a freshman, and Luke was a junior. Apparently, the two had a verbally heated conversation with a couple of guys at the bar. Sounds like it spilled out into the back of the bar where a more physical altercation went down. Luke and his friends split up after that altercation, and that was the last time anybody saw Luke. His body was found 3 days later at the bottom of the old Mississippi River. Well, he had multiple injuries to his head and arms. His death was ruled an accident, cold water drowning. He also had wounds on his face, head, as well as defensive wounds. Now, here's something I find very interesting. There were orange flecks found on his clothes, and those orange flecks, well, they matched the orange spray-painted smiley face near the scene approximately 100 yards from where Luke's body was recovered. At the time that Gannon and his team were investigating Luke's death, the local police were not cooperating at all. Now, the Mississippi River, it's a big one, right? And it's approximately a half a mile from the bar that Luke was at. Police at the time interviewed members of the band that played at the Vibe that night, and one of the bandmates interviewed recalled a man came by and urinated either on or near the band's equipment outside as this dude was packing up equipment. The night was ending and they were packing up all their stuff. The man who urinated sucker punched him, he said. He described the man who hit him and said that he had a red mark on his forehead. Now, canine unit dogs were release and sniffing on that van, and they did hit on it, detecting either blood or bodily fluids at the rear of that side of the van. Police did let this guy go. They didn't detain his vehicle for further investigation. Now, after Luke's body had been recovered, the FBI underwater recovery expert said it looked like Luke was in the water for anywhere between 3 to 12 hours, not 3 days, based on the lack of mud and debris, injuries, and bloating. Autopsy revealed that Luke's blood alcohol level was 0.32%. Death was ruled as a drowning. Now, same MO. While working with Gannon and his team, they asked Luke's mom if the police had given her Luke's belongings. Well, they hadn't. So they asked her if she would be willing to try to get them. Well, she was all in. So Patty, Luke's mother, called the La Crosse Police Department to request her son's property. Now, she did receive his things, and as soon as she had her son's belongings, she immediately handed them over to Gannon and his team. They, in turn, took them to a DNA forensic expert to see if there was anything that they could find. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Now, Christine, I know you have seen the Mississippi River. It's always brown. Every time I've seen it, it's brown. Super freaking muddy. I mean, the Mississippi River is like no joke. Well, what's interesting is that Luke's clothes were incredibly clean, almost spotless. Really no mud.
Really?
Yeah.
Did they clean them?
I don't know.
Which would be crazy weird to have done, but
yeah,
that is interesting.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And another thing that grabbed their attention were the belt loops on Luke's jeans. To them, they said it looked almost like someone had grabbed those belt loops like they were going to pull somebody, because the top of the belt loop was still sewn in, but the bottom is where it ripped from the jeans. That's very interesting. Then they used a fluorescent light on the front of Luke's jeans, and boom, flecks of bright orange. And not just in one spot, there were multiple areas of bright orange, not only on his jeans, but also on his sweater as well. Now, when they sampled the orange flecks, it was determined to be a component that's found in nail polish. But here's the thing, that same component is the same that they put in spray paint. So remember, there was an orange spray painted smiley face. They also evaluated the marks seen on Luke's head, because to them they were like, this is really bizarre. They had enhanced the photos of Luke's head, and when they did that mark that they've been looking at, what is this unusual mark, it turned out to look like the impression of a sole of a boot, like a hiking boot. Now, there were also some really odd looking scratch marks within that boot impression. And they were like, well, what in the hell would have caused that? Well, it was determined that it could have been a small stone or a pebble stuck in the tread of that boot. And that reminds me of the dude who killed Kaylee. Remember, he had the tire stem?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, the forensic expert also examined the photos of the SUV from the guy that was in the band. And when they're looking at it, there was boxes and stuff. And then on top of one of those boxes was a shoe or a boot. And the sole impression to them in the photo kind of looked very similar to what they had seen in that photo of Luke's forehead. So, off to a sole expert, they went to see if they could name the shoe from the back of the van. Now, the expert could not confirm that the shoe made the impression, but he did go deeper with the shoe impression on Luke's forehead, and he determined it's definitely a boot print of a right foot, indicating that pressure was applied as if pinning Luke down, not from a kick or a stomp. It would have been a totally different type of impression. So it sounds like there wasn't just one person involved in this. It would be more reasonable to believe that there were multiple people involved. I mean, let's remember, Luke is a big dude. He's strong. He's an athlete. As in the other cases, once Gannon and their team wrapped up their investigation, they felt that they had enough scientific evidence to bring to the police and that Luke's case needed to be reopened and looked at as a murder and not a simple drowning from intoxication. Gannon and Luke's family headed to La Crosse PD to present their findings. Now get this, the detective that they spoke to was one of the first responding officers on the scene 12 years ago at that point. And I thought that was a crazy twist of fate. And this also gave me a glimmer of hope that something would get done. But now this show aired in 2019. So at the end of this story, they pop up, any possible outcomes that could have happened. Well, Luke's parents are still waiting for anything from the police department. So just like in our other cases, nothing has changed. And at this point, I'm not surprised anymore. Our last victim that I'm going to tell you about is Dakota James. His story is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was January 25th, 2017, and Dakota was 23 years old. He had been missing for 40 days. As in the others, his death was ruled an accidental drowning, big surprise. The last time Dakota was seen was at 11:49 p.m., and this was caught by a street surveillance camera. I thank the gods for those, right? As in the other men I told you about, Dakota was smart, athletic. He was quite the soccer player, and guess what else? He was also on the swim team. In fact, he even was the captain of the swim team while he attended Duquesne University while he was working on his master's degree. During the initial investigation after Dakota's body was found, police told Pam, Dakota's mother, that they believed that, quote,
Dakota walked across the street after leaving the bar to head home. He walked to the bridge.
Now in this particular area, big rivers, and then there's like 3 different bridges, right? So it's like they're saying, okay, he walked to this bridge because it made more sense as to where his apartment was.
He walked up to the bridge. He walked down the steps going down to the water, probably to relieve himself. And this is where he fell in the river and drowned.
When speaking to Gannon, Pam, Dakota's mom, said that this explanation has never felt right to her, and that she felt that the police didn't even want to explore the possibility that there could have been foul play. She went on to say that she has no doubt in her mind that someone did this to her son. So he was a freaking champion swimmer. What the hell?
Yeah, I think it's kind of ironic that a few of these guys that have drowned, they've all been like bona fide swimmers, that it is highly unlikely that they would have drowned in the first place.
Yeah, all young,
but I mean,
athletic.
Hits on the head happen, but with all of these stories, the body degradation is what gets me.
Right.
There is no body degradation for as long as they've been missing.
Right.
Even if they were on dry land in the woods somewhere, there would be more, I don't know. I don't know what I'm expecting. Necrosis, animal pecking at them, insects damage. Like, I don't know. That's the thing for me.
Right.
That's the thing for me. It's like they were obviously somewhere else for many, many, many of the days that they were missing. And then they were found not long after being, in my opinion, dumped.
Right. Agreed. I am with you.
Yeah.
100%.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. It is said that Dakota's body was pulled 10 miles down in the Ohio River. They theorized that he fell in the Allegheny River, then floated down to where the Allegheny turns into the Ohio River. Now, the autopsy report shows zero evidence of recent physical violence or trauma. Now, mind you, this is 40 days later. Dakota's body would have had to go over or under a pretty significant dam, but yet the autopsy report says that there was very little damage to the body. Now, this dam, it's freaking huge. It is made of concrete and steel, and like there's, underwater walls, and those lift up, right? They can control them depending on, how full the river is, I guess. anything in the water would have to pass through it or under it. It would not go over it. It's just kind of the way it's made. So here are the results from his autopsy. 1, drowning, of course, found unresponsive in river. Pulmonary edema and congestion. The right lung weighed 460 grams. Now, I had to look that up because I'm like, well, what in the heck is the actual average weight of a lung, a right and a left lung for men? Well, it's approximately, on average, the right lung approximately weighs 445 grams, so we're not far off. And then the left lung weighed 400 grams. Now, the average weight of a left lung is approximately 395 grams, so all that tracks. Now, I pulled that information from organ weight in men from Duke University, so it's a pretty respectable website, and I put that in the show notes too if anyone wants to look at it. All right, second on the report is cardiomegaly, which means that he has an enlarged heart. Also, that his right ventricle was dilated. 3, moderate decomposition. After being in the water for 40 days. Doesn't track. 4, post-mortem toxicology, ethanol, 0.214, and no matter how you shake that, Dakota is not intoxicated. And in the show notes, I also have a chart for that. That's where I got that information. Okay, and then B, gamma hydroxybutyric acid, also known as GHB, and ibuprofen and caffeine. GHB again. Now, I did briefly mention that Dakota was seen on the street surveillance video, and here's the thing. His gait, meaning the way he walked, wasn't normal. He also appeared to be having difficulty walking. He was stumbling about. Now that we know that he had GHB in his toxicology report with minimal alcohol content, that behavior all makes sense. Now, during the investigation, the police had also taken Dakota's laptop, but they did return that to his parents relatively quickly, as they said there was nothing of value to be found. The detectives, Gannon and Duarte, they did ask her if she would mind letting him have that laptop. She did. She gave it to him. So they took that to a forensic digital expert. And interestingly enough, 2 days after Dakota became missing, there was also some bank activity. So I found that interesting, how that happened. All right. Now,
yeah, somebody was using his stuff.
Yeah, how'd they get that if he fell in the river? Please. Yeah. All right. Now, Dakota's mother told Gannon and Duarte that when it came to identifying her son at the morgue, she said they were told that they could not see her son's face. Now, she and her husband identified their son by his foot. You see, he had a tattoo on it, so they knew it was him. Now, his mother also told them that she didn't know her rights as a mother, that she could have demanded to see her son. So I hope it doesn't happen to anyone out there, but please no, don't let him tell you what you can and can't see. His mother asked Gannon and Duarte, what would the color of her son's skin be should he have been in the water for 40 days? Gannon's response was that her son's skin would have been black. She said, well, his foot was white. She also told them that not seeing his body one more time, really seeing his entire body, was her biggest regret. So there you have it. 6 investigations that Gannon and his team feel are connected to the smiley face killers. They provided each respective police department with all of their scientific research that clearly shows that these young men were not victims of being intoxicated and fell into the water and drowned. 6 cases that still to this day have not been reopened or reclassified. Just infuriating, and my heart completely breaks for the injustice to these victims and to their families. Now, regardless if they are connected to the smiley face killers or not, there is enough evidence that was presented by Gannon and his team that clearly shows these are highly suspect cases and they need to be reclassified and reinvestigated as homicides. The other thing, Christine, when you were telling me like none of this makes any sense, so on and so forth, the other thing that I keep thinking about is really how were these young men killed? Because there's really no overt signs on their bodies of what actually killed them. It just blows my mind. I cannot figure out what happened to these men. How was it that they ended up meeting their death? Like, what happened? I can't figure it out.
I'm there with you, and my gut, like listening to you, you know, how I'm imagining ulterior possibilities while you're talking, right? That's just how my brain works. My thing is, I kind of got a vibe that these guys, because they're all kind of athletic, they're all in college, well, for the most part, and you describe them as being, you know, healthy and virile kind of young college men, and they all have the GHB. I don't know, something about a jilted person that either had been roofied themselves or like the brother or the lover of someone that had been roofied, like they were getting back at this type of person on purpose.
That's interesting.
You know, like, I don't know, that's just my vibe about it. Like, if this is a thing and the smiley face killer, like, we go into all of this because, like, why do people tick like this? Like, why do they do this? And I'm feeling like this is a vengeance thing, but I'm feeling like it's partially blind vengeance. Like, it's like there was no rhyme or reason to why these guys were picked except for their type.
Right. You know what, Christine? I'm kind of there with you, too. Like, someone gets jilted and these men fit that profile. Maybe that's what their lover looked like. So now everyone that looks or reminds them of my ex-lover, they got to go.
Yeah. And not to victim blame in any way, but just to let everybody know, like, where my head's at. Like, let's just imagine that, because most of these guys weren't even really partiers, or at least that's how they've been post-mortemly described, right? Mm-hmm. None of them were real partiers. None of them were big drinkers. None of them had too many drinks that their friends noticed them have, but yet they're all roofied, right? They all have GHB in their system, and they all leave wherever they're at in a little bit of dire straits. Mm-hmm. They're way more messed up than the drinks that they've had. So somebody gave them that roofie in the one or two drinks that they had, which this is where I'm saying I don't want to be victim blaming, but perhaps those guys said something or did something inappropriate to a girl before they got roofied. And that was the reason why they got roofied, because they were that machismo kind of athletic college guy. You know, they're a little bit cocky. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just, it is what it is. And maybe they just got a little too cocky with the wrong person. They roofied them, and that's all she wrote. Like, they became the target.
Right now, there's just a couple differences here. Todd Geib is the only one who did not have GHB. Remember, he had the 2 tricyclic antidepressants in his system. So that's just the one off there. The other guys had the GHB. And the third thing is...
Yeah, but he was the first one?
No, he was just the first one I talked about because he was our Michigan guy. He was actually, well, at least in the series, he was the 6th episode. And then the other thing that kind of only throws off the whole possible hypothesis that maybe they, and I didn't talk about this so you wouldn't know because I didn't think it was important, but now that we're having this conversation, like in this vein, I think it is important to say that Dakota was gay. So I don't think he was offending any females, but who knows? Maybe he offended some dude, or I don't know what the target could have been.
Thing. I mean, people are people, and they're flirty and kind of inappropriate.
Right.
Regardless of their sexual
orientation.
Identification.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's plenty of times where gay guys, you know, say something inappropriate to a girl, or even another guy for that matter, when they're just talking nonsense.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because they were actually, him and his friend were actually at a couple gay bars that night before he left. So who knows? Could have been.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that was just my vibe. That was just, I think that's just the way our brains work from watching too many SVU moments. You know, like there's got to be a common thread, right? So where's the common thread?
Right.
So the only real common thread with any of these guys is that they were athletic college kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
So somebody had a chip on their shoulder about that type of person. And not to say that any of these victims were like that in any way, but if this is a serial attack person, then that's my vibe, is that that's where they were at. That was their motive. That these guys were really just in the wrong place at the wrong time, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, I do want to read an FBI statement that came out on the FBI National Press Office, and this is the FBI statement regarding these river deaths. Quote,
the FBI has reviewed the information about the victims provided by 2 retired police detectives who have dubbed these incidents the, quote, smiley face murders, and interviewed an individual who provided information to the detectives. To date, now this was in April of 2008, we have not developed any evidence to support links between these tragic deaths and any evidence substantiating the theory that these deaths are the work of the serial killer or killers. The vast majority of these instances appear to be alcohol-related drownings. The FBI will continue to work with the local police in the affected areas to provide support as requested.
So there's that.
Yeah, and I mean, there is also, smiley faces painted everywhere. It's like the basic vandalism graffiti you'd probably find anywhere, because there's always some non-artistic kid hanging out with a can of spray paint somewhere. You know what I mean? Like wherever there's spray painted, tagged graffiti areas, there's always going to be a smiley face somewhere on that graffitied area. You know what I mean? Because there's always one kid with no artistic talent hanging out with his friends that are making city skylines or whatever it is they're painting. You know what I'm saying?
That would be me. I would be that friend. I could do a smiley face.
Yeah, I do a smiley face. Yeah, that's it. But I don't have any other artistic abilities, especially with a spray can.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So the smiley faces, I'm not really sure, if that's, I don't know. That's really a lot to pin it all together with. I'm not really following that so much because I feel like anywhere you go and look at graffiti, you'll be able to find a smiley face somewhere. Yeah. There's always going to be a smiley face on whatever graffiti you're looking at.
Yeah.
However, the connection between some of them with the paint from the smiley faces, that's highly sus. But I don't know. This is really loosely threaded, the whole thing, because you could make arguments for happenstance and coincidence.
Right.
The biggest thing for me is the length of time that they're all supposedly in the water, but yet their decomposition rates do not correlate at all.
Right.
That's the fishiest part, no pun intended. That's the fishiest part for me, is that the fishies didn't have more contact with these bodies while they were in the water this long.
Yeah. Related or not related to the smiley face killer or killer theory, these men, in my opinion, were murdered. Period.
Yeah, they weren't in the water as long as they're saying.
No.
That's the kicker.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found it very interesting. Very interesting. And I can go along with it. I'm like, oh yeah, but like you said, it could be completely loosely related, not related, coinky dinky. But whatever happened to these men was foul play. Period. End of story.
Definitely. Agreed.
Yeah.
On that, we definitely agree.
Yep.
It's hinky.
It's very hinky.
Yeah.
Yep. So that concludes our little mini series that we did, our little trifecta on the smiley face killer. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I would be very interested to hear what you guys think about it. So drop us a comment. Let us know what your opinion is on that. So thank you, everyone. As always, we really appreciate you listening. Keep coming back because we've got more for you. So thanks, everyone, and have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.